Hey all, welcome to my studio. Peter Cervalli here. Glad you can join me. Just thought I would share with you 6 basic fundamentals when learning the classical guitar. So what I'm holding here in my hands is in fact the classical guitar. You may also know it as the Spanish guitar, the nylon string. I've even seen it being called or labeled the nylon. Sometimes on a theater gig, someone will be like, hey, you got the nylon for this one? But in essence, this is the classical guitar. And what sets it apart from others? Well, I'm glad you asked. The 3 people that asked. First of all, well, obviously nylon strings. And it is a bit of a thicker instrument in body width and in neck width. This is very unforgiving. And I also call it the honesty guitar because it will reveal the truth very, very quickly, which is great. So let's get into it. Okay, fundamental number 1. Let's talk about basics. Let's talk about sitting position. Traditionally with the classical guitar, you've probably seen old pictures of really old dudes probably playing the guitar with one leg, most likely probably the left leg, elevated with a footstool, which helps you elevate the instrument, bringing it a little bit closer to you. People still use this. Sometimes if you're not really careful or conscious with how you're using the footstool, you could lead your body into maybe some unhealthy sitting positions. So we got to be careful about that, especially with the hips and the lower back. For me, I have this device right here. It's called an ergo play, and it is what's called a guitar support. So all it does is with these suction cups, it attaches to the side of the instrument and it goes over my left leg, and my feet are completely level on the ground. Good sitting position. I'm sitting towards the front of my seat and things are more in alignment. And you're probably wondering, Pete, why do we have to use these things? Can I just put this guitar over my right leg? You could. The only thing with this guitar is that it is substantially thicker than maybe even just slightly thicker than your acoustic, traditional steel string acoustic. But the intentionality, I think, is that this is meant to be played more in the center of the body. And I think also it has to do with your left hand as well, how it operates on, the neck here is quite thick. So I think since it's such a beast to play, they probably thought, well, what's the most possibly tension-free, I say that loosely because there's lots of tension to be had here, position to play this guitar in. Also, I think too, if you hold this over your right leg, with your arm, it's such a big guitar that you can bring the shoulder maybe over a little bit too much. Now I know myself that I've had some shoulder issues because of doing that on this instrument. People who play steel string acoustic guitar do the same thing, probably after a while, especially those big Martin D28 dreadnought guitars. People kind of report having some shoulder injuries. But for this one, this works well for me and it works well for a lot of us folks. So it kind of keeps us centered and, trying to minimize as much tension in the body as possible and to just focus on music making. On to number 2. Alrighty, so let's head on to topic number 2, what we call the presentation of the hands, left hand and right hand. Let's start with the left hand. Generally, the left hand, when it comes to functioning on the classical guitar, if you notice on the neck of this instrument, this is the neck, if you take a look at the neck is kind of divided into boxes, right? And the boxes are wider over here and they get higher up here because the notes get higher, obviously, pitches get higher. These are called fret wires, but they separate the guitar into what we call frets, which are those boxes which I was talking about. In terms of the placement of the left hand, how the left hand looks when you're lower, I know this is a little bit counterintuitive because I'm pointing this way towards the head of the guitar and it seems like I'm pointing up. You can hear my dog in the background there. He's like, yeah. The pitches are lower here, the frets are wider, and as we progress up the neck of the instrument, they get smaller. So the presentation of the left hand, it shifts, it changes. Another big component is the thumb, what we do with our thumb. A lot of people ask this question. I'm going to flip this video so we can take a look at what my left hand is doing more precisely. Excuse the view of my kitchen floor here. If you take a look at where my thumb is on my left hand, let's just take a look at that. If you notice, it's kind of directly opposite the first and second fingers. If I'm just on my, for the sake of this demonstration here, on my first string, if I put one finger in each box, the thumb is in between fingers 1 and 2. So with the left hand, this is 1, 2, 3, 4. Different than piano, right? The thumb is nothing. The thumb is on the back of the neck here. But it's always in between, for the most part, in between fingers 1 and 2. Notice that if I bring it further in, I'm creating more tension in the palm of my hand here. And this is a very dense muscle and has a tendency, if we're not careful and mindful of the tension, it tends to cramp up quite quickly. So right in between fingers 1 and 2 is optimal placement for the right hand thumb. And I also mentioned here that our fingers are spread out. I'm just doing a 1 finger per fret demonstration here to demonstrate the presentation of the hands. As we slide up, the frets get smaller and the presentation changes. And I'll show this on an alternate view. Just a quick recap of the presentation of the left hand. So if we are in this presentation with 1 finger per box, notice the hand is almost kind of angled. As we progress up the neck, things start to change, right? Because the frets start to get smaller, and even coming up here, because we have the instrument kind of as a little bit of a barrier, we have to change. Things get really, really tight up here. So the movements are super small and super efficient. Anyway, moving on to the next topic, we have the right hand. So just a quick recap, the left hand, in terms of our pedagogical labels, number 1, 2, 3, and 4, and thumb obviously doesn't have one because it's on the back of the neck supporting the left hand. With the right hand, we have a label for each digit, right? The thumb is labeled P, index is I, middle is M, ring finger is A, and pinky is CH. These are all abbreviations for the Spanish words for each of these digits. Pulgar, indicio, medio, angular, and chico. So that's P-I-M-A-C-H. Just a quick recap. Now, the ultimate goal, what's the whole point of this? This instrument requires complete synchronization of both hands, right? So we have to work slowly, efficiently, making sure that we're moving slow enough that we're able to observe all these movements, and over time we begin to synchronize and internalize them, right? We develop our muscle memory, neural connections, and so forth. With the right hand, let's talk about a bit of a misleading term here. When I hear the term pluck, it gives me a little bit of the heebie-jeebies, and I'll tell you why. The truth be told is, maybe I can get a little bit closer here so you can see. Oh, my support is falling off here. Let's get that back on here. Okay. With the guitar, so what I'm going to do is, just with my index finger here, I'm going to pluck this string here in the middle, the G string. If I were to in fact pluck this string, it would sound like this. Right? It's quite misleading, because a pluck, to me, when I hear it and the way I want to perform that movement, it's almost like a snap, right? And now, unless that's what you're going for and that's what the music calls for, that's a completely different story. But what we actually do and what actually happens is, it's actually a push. And that sounds less pretty than pluck, but it is a push. We actually place our finger, right, on the string, And it's like we push down and towards our wrist. Right? And that gives a more rounder, fuller tone. Now, obviously, I play with some fingernails, not too long. There's a whole school of thought on nails, no nails approach. I find that the best sound that I can get out of my instrument is with nails, and the nail length is personal to the player. But it's a combination of the flesh and the nail, right? So I plant with the flesh of my fingertip, and I push. And what happens is that the string, let's see if I can get closer here. The string plants and it rides along the nail, and it's almost like a pick. It's super quick. And the smoother and the better the angle, the faster the transition, right? So a nice little exercise that I like to do is I like to place, let's just quickly go over each string here. So we got 6 strings on this instrument, right? The string closest to you, the thickest one, is your low E string. Your next one over, your 5th string, is your A string. Your 4th one is the D string. 3rd G, 2nd B, and 1st high E, right? We got a low E and we got a high E. What I would like to do is place your thumb on the low E string, index on the G, middle on the B string, and your ring finger on the high E string, right? Notice how there's a little bit of a space in between here, and that's what you want. You don't want this or that or like that, but you want to have some space from the thumb, in between the thumb and the index. Now, a good way to practice this is to play the low E, and then on this string here, we're going to try if we can push a little bit. Don't release the string, just give it some motion, and then push it in, and we're gonna release. Right? Let's do that with the middle. And with the high E. Perfect. Now, a good exercise to get this going, you don't even need the left hand for this. You can just sit there watching Game of Thrones, watching Lord of the Rings. I'm just saying that because that's what I'm watching. But what I do is I'll just demonstrate this exercise, and then you can have at it. And so on and so on and so forth. So get a metronome going, get a nice, comfortable tempo, not too fast, enough that you can think your way through it. And if you notice that my thumb was alternating between the E, A, and the G string, because these 3 fingers were pretty much staying on the G, B, and E, right? So we're programming them there to keep them there, right? And the thumb is just moving these bass notes, if you will. Also, too, one thing that I like to mention, too, something that the great guitarist Andreas Segovia, who's really the godfather of all of this in some ways, in one of his videos, it's a great point that he made that the guitar, the classical guitar, is like a miniature orchestra. Since Segovia didn't really do any orchestral conducting, or he didn't play an orchestral instrument really, let's just take this quite loosely, okay? But I think I understand what he was getting at. The timbral differences on this guitar, right? The possibilities and the varieties. And one thing that I wanted to address is where we like the presentation of the left hand, the presentation of the right hand. Now, generally, let me get this happening again here. Generally, I would say ground zero spot is right kind of below the sound hole here, right? That, right? You're gonna get a nice, big, full, round sound, right? But the more you go this way, past the sound hole, more towards the head of the guitar, right? It almost, to me, I almost hear like some low reeds, right? I hear clarinet and low register. That's kind of what I hear, right? You progress up towards the bridge of the instrument. Right? I almost kind of hear like trumpets, right? Like high, like bright brass. That's kind of what I hear. So I think that's what he was kind of getting at, is that we have a lot of we have a color palette available to us on the instrument, and we can express and use those colors in different ways. You can even do it with the left hand too, which is probably another video in itself. But for the right hand, playing closer towards the bridge of the instrument is going to produce, this thing does not want to stay on, is going to produce a brighter sound, heading more towards the sound hole and past it towards the neck joint here, you're going to get a darker sound. Okay, let's get into some actual more playing. Another fundamental technique that is a massively important building block of this instrument are your slurs, your hammer-ons and your pull-offs. And these are achieved and performed with the left hand. Generally, when we're playing melodies on the guitar, we can fall into a trap of maybe trying to over-articulate every note, right? And that tends to kind of almost sound like a kind of like a machine gun, right? That's not really what you want. What we're looking for is we're trying to interpret and convey something almost kind of like as close to the human voice as possible, right? Especially when you're talking about melodic lines, right? Because not everything is articulated all the time, right? There's space in between, there's nuance, there's shape, right? The left hand can help us achieve these things, and these hammer-ons and pull-offs are a great way to achieve this. So what we're going to do is, let's just take the G string here, right in the middle, right? So let's just go E, A, D, G, right? On the 3rd fret here, what I want to do is just pinch down at the bottom of the box with the tip of your first finger there. Now what you're going to do is you're going to strike that note, and you're going to strike the next fret above it with your middle finger. Let's do that again. All right? So with fingers 1 and 2, we're going to do that again with 2 and 3. Let's do that again. And with 3 and 4. Right. So those are called hammer-ons. So when you hammer on, you're hammering onto a note above, right? Makes sense. A pull-off is when you're pulling off to a note below. So a good way to demonstrate this concept is to just reverse this and go backwards, right? Actually, that might be a little bit too difficult. But you know what? Let's be adventurous today. Why not? Check this out. This is a video after all. So I'm going to pull off from 4 to 3, 3 to 2, and 2 to 1. Now, here's another term that's equally as misleading, which frustrates me. Pull off. Actually, this is almost kind of like, I hate to use this word because I condemned it already, a pluck off. Because what you're doing is you're actually plucking that string with your left hand finger. Let's go to open there. But a good way to practice this is, that's a good exercise as well. But if you want to isolate finger pairings, this is also a great exercise. Working on fingers 1 and 2, 2 and 3, 3 and 4. I'll just go over that quickly. And you can do this across actually all 6 strings. It actually makes sense. So I'm going to start here on the 3rd fret. I'm going to make my way all the way up to the high E string and go back. So I'm going to do hammer-ons and then pull-offs, right? And in terms of the right hand, I'm just going to pluck these notes with my thumb for the most part. Right. And now we can do the same with fingers 2 and 3. Notice where my index finger is, right? The index finger is just there for support. It's traveling along. It's going along for the ride, right? And now let's do the same thing with fingers 3 and 4. Little trick here, right? Fingers 3 and 4 are going to feel weaker. 2 and 3 probably the same. Right? And now what you can do, you can actually start to do non-adjacent fingers. So I can go 1 and 3. Two and 4. One and 4. Right. And then to do the pull-offs, you can just reverse that. 2 and 1. Because remember, we're pulling off to a note lower, right? 3 and 2. This is a great thing to do. This is like eating your vegetables, but only for classical guitar. 4 and 3. Three and 1. Four and 2. Again, notice where the index finger is. It's a support finger, right? Up. 4 and 1. Awesome. Now, is this musical? No, of course not. But that's not the point. The point is this is more about the discipline and the hard work of building hand strength, dexterity, and independence, and eventually synchronization, right? You can also do 1 finger per fret, which is kind of what we did on the G string earlier, right? And with this, I'm keeping the finger, notice that, let me see if I can get this in the angle here, maybe this way. Notice that when I'm playing, like the fingers are not over here waiting to go onto the instrument, right? They're not up here. They're really literally just hovering just above the string, right? And that's a precision thing. So let's continue. And I'm literally hammering and striking the string. This is where the hammer-on term is actually quite accurate, right? The pull-off, or pluck-off as I say, 4, 3, 2, 1. You know, and doing this at a slower tempo is actually probably better, but for the sake of demonstration, we're just gonna kick this up a notch. Just gonna speed this up a bit. So those are hammer-ons and pull-offs. Now we can do other things. We can combine them if you want. Lots of possibilities, right? Right, and now we can combine those, right? And create more slurs, right? Let me just do that quickly here for you. Right, and the slower you do it, not ridiculously slow, but enough where you can feel the movement, right? You're not rushing it, making sure everything is even. Leave no stone unturned, right? So those are great. That's eating your musical vegetables every day. I think that's fantastic. Next thing I wanted to actually touch upon is going back to the right hand for a minute. So if those are your vegetables and musical nutrients for your left hand, we got it for the right hand as well. Yes, we do. So what we're going to do is we're just going to use, there's many combinations you can do. And in terms of right hand development, we actually encourage that we explore all combinations as possible. But for right now, we're going to stick to plucking the strings with our right hand in this exercise with your index and your middle finger. Okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to start a little higher up on the instrument here. It's a little bit easier. Let's start on the 5th fret, okay? Right here on the 5th fret with your index finger on your low E string. We're going to not pluck, but push, remember? We're going to push, and then on the next note up with your middle finger, next, index, middle. I'm saying index middle for the right hand here. So we're just going to call this a 1, 2, 3, 4 pattern for right now. Let's just go on each string and go back. Now again, this is not a musical exercise. This is a purely technical exercise. But the benefits, if you can hang in there, speed this up a bit. If you can hang in there, you'll reap the rewards, right? Generally, what we do is we'll move up and we'll do the same things on higher frets, literally going up 1 fret at a time and moving all the way down. Generally, it's a lot harder to start here for beginners because the fret spacing is quite wide, right? So it can be a little bit uncomfortable. You may feel like you're trying to push a boulder uphill, right? We want to have some progress to kind of kick the fire and get the fire started, yeah? So generally starting between frets 5 and 7, moving your way up, that's a good way to go, right? So I did it with index and middle. You want to do it with middle and ring finger, index and ring finger, right? All combinations in between. You can, now that's doing one attack each time, right? You can double it up. And so on and so forth, right? So this is a great exercise. Those are called, don't even think there's an actual term for it, but we used to call them permutation exercises, because what would happen is, so we're doing 1, 2, 3, 4 with the left hand, right? You can start mixing up those fingers. This is where it starts to get a little bit crazy and you start to go down the rabbit hole with Alice, is that you can call up a buddy and be like, hey, give me a combination of 1, 2, 3, 4, scatter it around. And they're like, well, I don't know. How about 4, 2, 1, 3? You're like, fine. Right? You know, and go through all of them, right? Because again, you get through that boring stuff and you stick with it, it's gonna yield some great results. All right, let's get on to another fundamental here. So I usually save this one for a little bit later because it tends to kind of slow down the momentum of a lesson in the beginning. But it's tuning the instrument, right? Basics. Generally, you can do it 2 ways. We got electronic tuners today, which are quite accurate, right? And as long as you know what each string is supposed to be tuned to, what the pitch is supposed to be, you can use an electronic tuner quite easily. So with all these 6 strings here, let's just go over this one more time. The string closest to you, the thickest one, is your 6th string, your low E. Your next one down is your 5th string, your A. Next one down, 4th string D. Next one, third string G. Next one down, second string B. And then next one down, first string E. Right? So you got a low E and a high E. Funny enough, back in the day, in the Baroque era, music nerdery, music history, boring alert, beep, 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 beep. But the guitar actually didn't have a sixth string, a low E. Didn't have that. Came a little bit later. Generally, the guitar was a 5-stringed instrument, right? So it just had an A string, A, D, G, B, E. Okay? Anybody wants to know that? No, who cares? I think it's cool. Anyway, so generally speaking, tuning your instrument, if you want to tune it by ear, I highly recommend it, and I think it's a great way to be able to do that. However, if you don't have perfect pitch, which a lot of people do, a lot of people don't, right? But having relative pitch is super important regardless, right? You have to be able to trust whatever that is, right? Or some people have a tuning fork where they strike the tuning fork and they place it on the soundboard and that will give you an A, right? I don't have one here with me, but generally that's how the tuning fork works. And then you kind of tune the guitar relative to that. But in terms of, if we just trusted where this was at, you can tune the guitar relative to this, right? And generally how you would do that is this. So if you play the 5th string, right? I'm sorry, the 6th string, my bad. And if you press down on the 5th fret, there we go, that's going to give you the note of the next string, right? So that's your A, right? So that sounds pretty good, right? So let's do that again. So that's our low E. I want to tune, so we're already trusting that E is in tune, right? Whether it is or it isn't, it's gonna be where it is. You want to tune the A string. You press down on the 5th fret, the 5th fret of the E string. Okay, let's go on. You want to tune the D string, you have to press down on the 5th fret of the A string. And let's see. Okay, G string, 5th fret of the 4th string. Not bad. Now, this is where it's a little bit of a shift. If you want to tune the B string, you got to press down on the 4th fret of the G string. Okay. Now, if you want to tune the high E string, you press down on the 5th fret of the B string. Okay? Sounds okay to me. You tell me. Sounds fine to me. Anyway, next. All right, here we are with our final fundamental. And our final fundamental is... I can't hear you. What? What? You got it. Listening. Now, what does this mean? Listening to what? Yourself? To others? To the sea? To the ocean? To the seagulls here? Yes, all of the above. Generally, what I'm talking about is listening to yourself, to others, and to recordings, right? So recordings is a great way for you to dive into the culture of this instrument, right? It's going to get you acquainted with repertoire, with the players, with the composers. The more listening you can do, and not just to the guitar, to other instruments as well, right? Orchestral music, commercial music, anything, right? Music, sure, we have all this nice, calligraphy on the page in terms of notation, and it's this beautiful theoretical intellectual dance we do with the music, blah, blah, blah. That's fantastic. But music is an oral art form, right? It is, we hear it here first, not here, right? So I highly encourage, listen to recordings. Also, listen to yourself. Go record yourself. It is easier than ever these days to record yourself. You can do it with video. I highly recommend recording your practice also with video, or just practicing with your phone on video. You don't have to record if you want to if you're working on technique and you're just looking at how the presentation of your hands. maybe, you know, watching if you're developing any bad habits. That's a great way to do it. But recording yourself in terms of checking your progress is fantastic, because the mode of perception that we have when we're listening as opposed to being in the moment playing is completely different, right? We're able to observe a little bit more, right? I mean, that's even a goal in performance, is like to be able to get to that level of hearing and awareness and perception as if we were just listening to somebody and not actively playing, right? But that's a conversation for another day. That's meta, too deep for right now. But this has been fantastic. Thank you for joining me in all the classical guitar nerdery. I'm Pete Seravalle, and we'll catch you next time.